So tonight's discussion is really a workshop on anxiety and depression and management thereof. Sort of approaching it from the standpoint of the body, which is sort of my area, mind and spirit. And Georgia Kellogg is going to talk about some technical things that I think that are very, very interesting and allow us to explore the subject in a little more detail. So let me go ahead and advance my slides, see if I can make this work. There we go. Okay, so so this also, the subheading under this, for those who can't read it in the back, is biohacking stress from your life. So do any of us have any stress at all? Like 2020, 2021, pretty bad, right? And like right now, a lot of things that we're processing through, and we're trying to make sense of it, and a lot of times it doesn't make sense. And when we have that in our lives, that generates a stress response. And each of us are handling it a little bit differently. Some people handle it very nicely, and they sort of pass it off and don't register it all. Maybe different people have different defense systems to sort of protect them from stress. They can be helpful or they can be harmful, depending on how we process that. Obviously, if you completely ignore your stress, then you're not ready to react, right? It has a purpose. So stress has a purpose. But we want to biohack it, meaning we want to take charge of it. We want to take charge of it in our lives. So I like the study of words a little bit, and I wanted to sort of figure out where did the words anxiety come from? Because a lot of people say, you know, I'm anxious about something. Well, does that mean that you're really excited? You know, you can't wait? Or you're anxious from a negative standpoint, that it's like hurtful, right? That you're like nervous about it. So the word anxious comes from the root word of ang, A-N-G-H, which means to painfully constrict, or to narrow, or to squeeze, or to distress, or to trouble. Now, on the positive side, it also means to earnestly desire. So it has the other side, and it just depends on how do you approach that, right? How do you approach anxiety? Now, the background of the word and the technical word, when you start to study words, is called etymology. I didn't know that. It's like, how do I find out what a word means? Depression, we talked about depression here tonight. Depression, D means down. Press means to push or force. Okay, so very clear. We have oppressors. We have people who oppose us and put pressure on us. So oppression. And then repression is to resist. Okay, the resistive force of that pressure. So sort of interesting derivation of the words. So in this picture, who's the stressor and who's the oppressor? Is it the same person? Is it the same thing? I'd say, yeah, the lion here. The lion, the zebra's just looking like, okay, am I the next meal, right? He has to have some resistance, right? He's got to have some resilience. And he has a couple choices that he can make in order to resist this particular stress that has come into his life. So let's look at that. So the situation is, you got a zebra and a lion, and then as you move on, are you the zebra? Okay. The lion, that lion could be just a temporary problem, or it could be a long-standing problem. I'm sorry, my words aren't overlapped there. That's what it says. It says acute, or long-standing would be chronic. Okay. The choices that we have in the situation, the conflict, again, I'm sorry the words don't line up here, the PowerPoint's sort of messing up. We have fight or flight. So the stresses come into our life, we can either fight it or we can run away, okay? And stay and do the fight. And the outcome of that, the resolution is you either run away and live, in this case, right? And everything then returns to normal, presumably. Or you stay and big question mark, what will happen? Probably nothing good, right? Okay, so that's how stress sort of evolves. All right, so when you're in that situation, you're preparing for the fight. You get in touch with what happens when you're being threatened. Okay, different hormones start to take effect. Different neurotransmitters start to become operative in your system. And in the case of like adrenaline, everyone knows what adrenaline is, right? It speeds up your heart rate. It also has different effects on different organ systems. On the liver, it causes the liver to release large amounts of glucose, which is used for energy. So you can have the energy to run away. You need that energy stored. Muscles, it gets them to twitch. Have you noticed that, like when you're almost shaky, when you're nervous, right? That's because the muscles are on alert. They're ready to respond so that you can get away quickly, like the zebra. Cardiac increases blood pressure and your heart rate. You want to make sure that there's lots of perfusion of blood through those muscles so that you can get away quickly and they can use those energy stores that you've given them. And then your brain enhances your alertness. Your eyes focus. They get really constricted. They sort of like lock down on things. You become hypervigilant, almost like tunnel vision. Almost like you can't see the rest of what else is going on because you are so focused on that threat, right? That's part of your fight or fight response. And sometimes it leads to poor judgment because you see nothing else, right? You see nothing else around you. You have no awareness of the rest of the situation, just what is the focus. And then your eyes improves your focus and you're tracking. You're right on it. Think of it like an animal, right? Because after all, we all are instinctively animals. All right, so that's how epinephrine works. Let me see if it could. But chronic stress is a little bit different. That's the acute situation. Chronic stress is, if you're constantly stimulating that flight or fight response, you know, the body gets a little dull to the sensation after a while. Is it really going to work as effectively if the threat is always there all the time? You're always carrying that burden? And eventually depletes the system of those hormones and those neurotransmitters that it needs because there's never any resolution. The problem never goes away. And hormonally, the biochemical signals are still there. The adrenaline's still there, your blood pressure is up, right? You sweat a lot or whatever is the problem, you know, you still feel the stress, even though it's chronic. Well, eventually you run out of steam and then you feel like depleted, worn out. But they're still there and they still affect the body and they cause problems. So now I use a big word, homeostasis, basically means you never return back to normal. There's no balance. It just stays abnormal. So long-standing stress starts to damage those organ systems. Cortisol starts to be released, that epinephrine, BDNF, which stands for brain-derived neurotrophic factor. These are hormones and chemicals that the body secretes that could be beneficial, but around for a long time may be harmful. So we're going to talk about some of those chemicals specifically next. I just want you to see that there's a lot of different things to it. So let's talk about cortisol. Cortisol is cortisone. Most people would refer to it as a steroid. So you know there's all kinds of steroids, right? There's sex steroids, which are testosterone and estrogen, and they have a positive and appropriate effect on the body. Cortisol, as a general rule, is for stress, meaning it's for healing. So everyone makes cortisol, everyone has cortisone present, but under situations where cortisol is being made all the time because of stress, eventually you can't make it anymore. And that sets you up then for feeling run down, having a low immune system, for example, because you know that steroids, if you give high doses of prednisone, eventually it suppresses your immune system. What else happens if you're on prednisone? Does everybody know? You get puffy. You gain weight, right? You gain weight. You eat. You have high blood sugar. Your blood sugar tends to stay high.
Get angry.
What else?
Angry.
Angry. Yeah, you're on edge, right? You're edgy. But it also suppresses your immune system. If people are on prednisone, they use that to suppress people's immune system. That's what they use oftentimes to treat like folks that have asthma, or in the case of this COVID disease, cortisol is used to suppress the cytokine storm to prevent you from having an overreaction. It's used in allergic reactions, okay? So it's derived from the adrenals. It's a derivative of cholesterol. All steroids come from cholesterol. And like I said, estrogen, testosterone, and aldosterone, those are other hormones that are made by the adrenals. So what happens if you keep on making cortisol? What do you think happens to these other important steroids, estrogen and testosterone? Do you think that maybe they might be depleted over time? Possibly, right? And epinephrine is also derived from cortisol. So all these things are tied together. All right, so let's go to the next one. So epinephrine, we said, is a potent heart stimulant, right? It's potent muscle stimulant, stimulates your brain. That's the effect of why it's used in stress. It's derived from your adrenals, and again, it's a derivative of cholesterol. So they're all sort of related, okay? All right, now this BDNF thing that I talked about. BDNF is a brain-derived, meaning, just like it says, derived. Neurotropic, meaning goes to the nerve tissue, So it's a factor that works on nerve tissue. It heals brain cells. It's responsible for our neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is the ability of the brain to heal, nervous tissue to heal. It used to be thought that if you damage the nerve, it would never grow back. But we know that's not true now. We know that 3 to 5% of nervous tissue will grow back every year. So you're constantly, if you have BDNF, adequate amounts of BDNF present, you actually have nervous system healing. And so people who, you hear this all the time, of someone who's had a stroke, say, and they lost the use of their arm, but in time and with therapy, they gain back the ability to walk or whatever is the function that they lost. So the body has the ability to restore that. It's not as quick as it was when you're a child, where you have a lot of potential, but when you're older, you need this BDNF to be there in order to heal. So it's functional in Alzheimer's, it's functional in dementia, it's functional in Parkinson's disease. It needs to be there in order for us to heal. So you get decreased brain healing if you don't have BDNF present, okay? All right, so when your adrenal glands get depleted by this chronic stress, you have decreased production of testosterone. Well, lack of libido. Men and women both have testosterone, and they need that for that, sexual drive. Estrogen, lack of menses. So an athlete under stress. The classic example is the Olympic athlete who's training so hard, right? Eventually, they stop menstruating because their body perceives that extra physical effort that they're doing all the time as stress. Or in times of hunger, or in times of severe fasting or starvation, the menses go away. Again, it's a marker of the body being under stress. And the reason is because they're being depleted. Aldosterone is salt, a way that we hold on to salt, so you lose your ability to hold on to salt. Epinephrine, when you don't have enough epinephrine, you don't have energy. It's what makes those muscles twitch, makes your brain active, right? Yes, it's used in the fight or flight response, but if you don't have it, imagine how you feel. You have no energy to get off the couch because you need that adrenaline. And your heart rate runs a little slower, and you're just moving at a different pace. Norepinephrine is one of those things that's in balance with some other neurotransmitters, and people talk about norepinephrine all the time for folks that have attentional problems. So people who have attentional problems or even in depression, you can't focus, you can't concentrate. So that's responsible for your ability to focus. A lot of those medicines like Adderall and Ritalin and those types of things, those are artificial derivatives of norepinephrine, and that's how they work. All right, now what causes the damage when you're under stress? Well, you have the emotional stress, but the bigger picture is this thing that I alluded to last time in our talk, which is called oxidative stress. And oxidative stress is a metabolic end product of basically burning your candle at both ends. And the cells start to take on damage and they don't produce as much of the good things that they do, and the cells start to hurt themselves. So oxidative stress is felt to be at the root cause of most disease processes, including anxiety and depression. Okay, so again, chronic stress response, I mentioned, is different than the acute stress response, right? So acute means like right now, and chronic means long lasting. Nervousness or shakiness, poor thought process and memory decline. Okay, so just sort of take an inventory of these things. Sleep disturbances, lack of appetite. These are the hallmarks of these sorts of chronic stress response. Elevated blood pressure for the reason I've told you before, because you had all this adrenaline around for a long time. Not to mention that all that elevated blood pressure for a while starts to hurt the blood vessels. And then what happens is they start to, when blood vessels are damaged, they start to lay down calcium on the inside of the blood vessels, which makes them even narrower and leads to then long-standing hardening of the arteries. So that's another stress response that's not healthy. Then the blood pressure doesn't get better. Chronic fat store releases. Remember I said the liver is stimulated to make fat and burn fuel so that you have energy. That's what it's supposed to be for. But imagine if you have blood that's always got fat floating around in it because it's mobilizing fat from the system. Well, eventually you end up with fat accumulation on the inside of blood vessels again. And that clogs up things, including the brain and the heart and other organs. Chronic elevation of blood sugar, I mentioned that, cortisol, again. So basically, diabetes, whether it be type 1 or type 2 diabetes, or say diabetes of pregnancy. Pregnancy is a stress on the body, so a lot of women will have elevations of blood pressure as a result of pregnancy. It's an artificial state, temporary state in the body. Decreased healing, I mentioned before, remember I said that if you had high levels of cortisol or prednisone, you don't heal as well. So that would be a secondary factor. In people who are depressed or anxious, they may not heal as well. Inflammation due to all those free radicals, that oxidative stress floating around, it's damage going on. So things start to hurt. More and worse symptoms of, say, muscle fatigue or achiness or fibromyalgia symptoms may worsen. How many of you have heard of folks that have those kind of conditions and say are in a sad state or have had something and all their symptoms get worse because they're focusing on those issues, right? And there's a lot of inflammation going around, just exaggerates it. And then salt wasting from the kidneys. Like I said, you can't hold on to salt appropriately, so you start craving salt. And then as you crave salt, you gain weight. And so that's not a good thing. That also increases your blood pressure, okay? So nothing good in this list at all. Okay, so we want to reduce chronic stress. That's really, acute stress is okay. We're getting ready for the fight, we're going to resolve it, and it's going to go away. So the piano lesson on the stage of the young kid who goes up, and she's got her first recital, the butterflies are going and the heart's pumping fast, so she's going to perform well, and she'll get a little bit of initial nervousness, right? But it will dissipate as she gets through it and she'll resolve it. But that's an entirely different thing than chronic stress. So we want to eliminate the threat, that's the number one. Get rid of the oppressor. Number two, forms of meditation, prayer, mindfulness, taking inventory of what those feelings are so that you can say, okay, this isn't right, I know I've got to do something about it. You have to recognize it first, rather than just blowing it off. So sources of way to do that, if you're not able to do it yourself, is of course therapy. That's helpful, counseling, having someone else to offload that to be a receptacle for you, to be able to help you work through those stresses and come to some sort of, understanding of what it is that's happening to you. That's so important. A lot of people don't have that. And you can do this also through hypnosis. EMDR, which will be mentioned tonight as a way to reduce stress and to get through anxiety and traumatic experiences, for example. Nutritional approach, that's my focus. I like to focus on what can we do nutritionally to make ourselves the best that we can be. And the first thing is remove the toxic burden. If you know something's bad for you, get rid of it, right? If you know you're poisoning yourself by eating something badly, get it out of your diet. You have to take that first step. Those are things that you can control. So you want to get rid of those burdens. That could be something as simple as Coca-Cola and caffeinated beverages and sweet tea. When you get rid of the extra sugar, you get rid of the caffeine. Caffeine sort of mimics epinephrine, which makes you sort of nervous and shaky. So why do you want more of that? You want to remove those things. So that's why I said taking inventory of what it is that you can do, right? Exercise. Exercise absolutely de-stresses you, right? It lowers your blood pressure. It gets some of that adrenaline out of your system, gets you moving again, right? It sheds some needed weight if you need to lose weight. And by the mere fact that you are using that nervous energy, if you will, for something constructive to make yourself better, then you're going to heal yourself. So that's important to get in your life. Sleep, obviously, that's when our bodies repair themselves. There have been studies shown time and time again that people who do not sleep are not in the right mental mind the next day. They can't think straight. Not only are they tired or exhausted, but they're not focusing like they should. They're not performing at their jobs as well. And over time, actually, they did studies in animals who were deprived of sleep and they died. They die prematurely because of the lack of brain healing. We require as humans sleep in order to recover. And then in some cases, medication's needed, and sometimes sedation, actually. Sedation with drugs, depending on how severe it is. Clearly, that requires a physician's oversight in that. We don't, now the problem is people who self-medicate. There are a lot of people who self-medicate. They'll use toxic substances or illicit substances, or sometimes not illicit substances, sometimes prescription substances, and overuse them and abuse them. And in those instances, it's a form of self-medication. Okay, so just to be, identify all these. All right. Okay, so I'm going to talk about nutrition now for a second. We're going to sort of come down to that. So I've mentioned some of these before in some of my talks, and some of that will sound familiar to you again. And I'm just going to very quickly sort of highlight them and why they're on the list. Okay, and just take inventory of it. First is NRF2. I've talked about this all the time. NRF2 is a metabolic pathway in the body that is responsible for us to heal. It's a detoxification pathway. It reduces free radicals and oxidative stress, period. That's what it does. There are about 400 disease states that are associated with lack of adequate NRF2 activation. It stimulates BDNF, so that's a good thing, and it helps us to detoxify. So that's the first thing I want to mention. Probiotics, I mentioned this last time as well. That was a big focus of my talk. We were talking about gut health. It enhances your gut response to stress, okay? And it elevates serotonin levels, which are an anti-anxiety hormone or neurotransmitter. I mentioned in my last talk, if you weren't here, that serotonin, when people take Zoloft and they take Prozac and drugs, in order to increase their serotonin levels, that's the reason why those medicines are used. There's other ones, Lexapro, there's a number of different products like that. Wellbutrin is another example. They're all serotonin increasers. So where does serotonin come from? Serotonin does not come from your brain. It does not come from your bloodstream. It comes from your intestine. It's made by the cells that are in your colon with the cooperation of the bacteria that live there. That's where your serotonin comes from. And if you don't have adequate, proper, healthy bacteria in the gut, then what happens is you don't produce adequate amounts of serotonin. So it's really important to have super good gut health. Unfortunately, bad bacteria have a tendency to persist, and good bacteria have a tendency to go away. So you're constantly hurting all those good, healthy bacteria that you want by what you eat, and eating bad foods and stuff like that, and taking antibiotics, for example. That's a real quick way. Now, sometimes you have no choice. You have to be on an antibiotic for a reason, but it takes a long time for the gut to recover, and a lot of people feel sad afterwards, and they don't know why. Why do I feel off? And their stomach complains, So, serotonin, so the probiotics are a solution. Now, absolutely everybody should be taking a probiotic, okay? That's just my feeling. I use it extensively. And it's such a low-cost answer, too. I mean, it's much better than taking the drug. All right, so NRF1, that may be one that you don't know about. So these are all metabolic pathways in the body. Yes, sir.
What is the prebiotic?
A prebiotic is food for the probiotic. Fiber. Prebiotics are fiber. And fiber helps to feed the probiotic so the probiotic will live. So just the question was, what is a prebiotic as opposed to a probiotic? There's actually prebiotics, probiotics, and postbiotics. You really want to get that too. The probiotic is the actual living organism, bacteria, like what's found in yogurt and fermented foods. You can take it in a good form that establishes itself in your intestine and grows in a healthy way to help sustain your normal intestinal bacterial load, which we all need to live with. Now, they can eat a lot of different things. Probiotics, the bacteria can eat things. They can eat alcohol, they can eat sugar, they can eat some fat, but they love fiber. That is their main food. So if you have a diet that's devoid in fiber, you're not going to go to the bathroom very often, you're going to be constipated. And now if you do too much fiber, you'll have too much gas. If you feed your probiotics too much sugar, you'll also be gassy. Okay, so it's a balance. It's finding out what's right for you. So for most people, a probiotic that's sort of time released and takes a while to sort of work and then making sure that you're digesting everything appropriately, and then you feed your body appropriate amounts of fiber, which you get from fruit and vegetables, hopefully in a good, healthy diet. Okay? Now, if you're not, then people will take a prebiotic to help to sustain those bacteria. Again, there's always a point of you can do too much, and take too much prebiotics, you'll have a lot of gas. Beans, right? Beans? You know the story. What's it, Brian? I want to say it because we're on camera. I don't want to do it on camera. Beans, good for the heart, right? Okay, they're fiber, high in fiber, and so that's why you get gas from that. Okay, but appropriate amounts, or you gauge it, and you determine your own levels that work for you. Okay, so NRF1. NRF1 is the pathway like NRF2, but its focus is that on the mitochondria, which are the powerhouses of the cell. So the cells all need energy, and they do that by making ATP, right? And the mitochondria are the sources in the cells that make ATP. So all sugar turns into ATP. Without ATP, you're finished. So you have to have ATP. So you want to have good, healthy mitochondria. If you don't have good, healthy mitochondria, or they're low in number, you have no energy. So oxidative stress damages mitochondria too. So if you don't have enough mitochondria, you're sort of running low. Okay? So that's another pathway that we can address. And we can do that through foods. And then the last one is NAD, and that's sort of new kid on the block, and this has been like the holy grail of longevity, and everybody's talking about NAD. There are lots of different supplements that people take to try to increase their NAD levels, but basically as you get older, when you hit about 40 or 50 years old, you have about half of the NAD in your system that you did when you were young. And when you're 80, you probably have depleted about 95% of NAD, so it's a finite material that everyone is looking to regenerate. And the way that most people try to regenerate it is by doing some simple things. One is to stress the body. An example of stress, and I'm getting in the weeds now a little bit for you guys because I can tell you guys are hungry for it. But if you starve yourself, if you do caloric restriction, you'll increase your NAD levels. Your body sees it as a stress, again, stress, right? And so the body responds to that and increases NAD levels. And then that makes you more alert, and you can do things better, you concentrate, better memory, and cellular cleanup. Better getting rid of cancer cells and all that. Those are some of the functions that NAD has in the body. So another way to do it is intermittent fasting. So that's why everybody's big on intermittent fasting. They lose a little bit of weight, but also they're improving their lifespan longevity because they're increasing their NAD levels. NAD, by the way, does anyone want to know what that stands for?
Yes.
You want to know?
Yeah.
Nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide.
We had to know that. Can you spell it?
So it's a chemical derived from niacin. You thought I wasn't going to have that, right? So NAD. So a lot of people take niacin, or they'll take some nicotinamide kind of like products to try to raise their NAD levels. It really doesn't do a good job, and it's super expensive. You can raise your NAD levels by about 4%. 4%, that's not very much. And you can spend hundreds of dollars doing it a month. You can intermittent fast, and you can raise your NAD levels by 96%. Take you 3 days, but you can do it. Now you have to continue to eat that way. You have to be very, very good about intermittent fasting. Not everybody can do that. There are NAD stimulants, just like NRF2, in foods, if you know the right foods to choose, that can raise your NAD levels by 100% in 24 hours, and you don't have to fast. The other way that you can raise NAD levels is you stress the body in thermal stress. You ever hear of people who would go on a spa trip and go in the hot tub and then get in a cold plunge?
Yeah.
Or go on the Arctic waters in Iceland and then get in a hot spring? That sudden change they do that to raise their NAD levels. That's the mechanism, okay? Now, of course, you have to survive the heart attack as you go from the hot water to the freezing cold water, right? Okay, and then the other thing is omega-3 fats, which aid in your neural communication between the brain cells and the muscle cells. So omega-3s are a specific type of fat that is protected for the brain. Your brain is 70% omega-3s. So you want plenty of omega-3s to replace the brain shrinkage that happens as we get older. And in children who have learning disabilities and adults who have neurologic conditions, so forth, usually they need some help with additional omega-3s. So I recommend omega-3s. It's safe to take. Okay. Plus, it's great for your heart and they're anti-diabetes at the same time. Okay. So really, I mean, this is my big list. Okay. Alkalized water is also an antioxidant for those who drink alkalized water. That's a good thing. You can find that at Sam's and so forth. They'll sell alkaline water. That's what the deal is on that. And it's supposed to have better hydration and support the hydration of your tissues, which everybody needs water. All right, so that's alkalized water. Okay, let's talk about it. All right, so now I know you can't see this. And if you're interested later, you can take your phone and you can copy that QR code. You could, I'll try to find a way to blow it up and you can copy it. But I did a pub. Is anybody familiar with PubMed.gov? Mm-hmm. You know what it is? PubMed.gov is the NIH research website. And you can go to PubMed.gov and you can type in any term that you want and do your own research, and it will give you thousands of articles on whatever that is. So I typed in this first one, it says oxidative stress and anxiety. That's the QR code. I put it there so if you wanted to photograph it, you could get that search. And there were 1,582 hits on that topic. Okay, so that is oxidative stress and anxiety. So there's a link between oxidative stress and anxiety, and they talk about all the articles, and you can read them all. It'll take you years to get through, but I did it because I wanted you to know that people have looked at this. That was the only reason for having this here. This one is NRF2 and anxiety, and there were 64 results. So 64 results talking about NRF2 and its influence on anxiety. So I would encourage you to do those search terms and look for it yourself. Just do the research and just see what it says. I mean, some of it won't make any sense to you because it's really technical stuff, but I just want you to see that we understand that these mechanisms are there, and that's what we're talking about today. All right, on this next one, this is oxidative stress and depression. So I typed in oxidative stress and depression, and I got 4,300 and some odd results. Oxidative stress and its influence on depression. So pretty much what I said in my talk, right? Yeah. And then under NRF2 and depression, 343 results. So NRF2, and so we have some easy mechanisms that we can start to use besides necessarily drugs all the time that are basically forms of food or food supplements that can help to stimulate those pathways that perhaps can help us to repair. Do you have that handout, Kim? Is there a handout that, would you mind giving that to everyone in the audience? Steve, thank you. I wrote down a card for those of you as we get through this. If you are not trying or have not used any of these, I curated a collection of some of these products that I mentioned, NRF2, NRF1, NAD, probiotics, oxidative stress reducers, and whoever, depending on who suggested that you come tonight, I'm going to just have you look over that card, and if you are interested in that, just leave it behind and we'll get it and we'll call you and find out what it is that we can do to help you. So, reducing chronic stress, a nutritional approach. First thing is, in order of priority, this is my opinion, for treating anxiety and depression. NRF2, NRF1, and NAD. It's such an easy thing to do. Okay, they're supplements. They reduce free radicals, reduce oxidative stress, stimulates BDNF, and detoxifies. I want that. Okay. My personal experience, 5-6 years ago, in my office, and she's not here tonight to testimony for me, but she said, Dr. Goodman, I have something that I really think could really help you. And I was like, what are you talking about? She says, well, you're so stressed out. I said, look what I do every day and look where I work. I mean, it's stressful work. And I took her advice, and I actually utilized these products, and I wasn't really expecting very much. I didn't know anything about it at that time. And then as I did the research, it was like, holy, I mean, really? All this is in the literature like that? Why didn't I know about this? They never taught me this in medical school. It's exactly right. Most doctors don't even know about this because they're so stuck in the box looking in this little very narrow window of their education, I was caught in that you can't look outside. These are the doctors who are talking about integrative approaches, right? Using other things besides just always medicine all the time. There are other answers. And these other modalities, some of which you're going to hear about tonight, are part of integrative approach to treatment for anxiety and depression. It's not always taking a pill of medicine. You can take vitamins and supplements and food and clean up your life and get some of the bad stuff out of your life and do exercise and all the stuff that everybody's, everybody knows what they need to do, and I think in their heart to get better. It's just, we got to do it, right? All right, so the three together I call the tri-synergizer. That's how I label it, because they synergize these three pathways that are within us and cause us to heal and improve. Some of you may be on some of these products, you may not be on all of them. I just offered this up, and if you're interested, we'll get that information to you. Okay, so it also enhances mitochondrial regeneration and resistance. So we're addressing that NRF1 pathway, and then repletes energy, enhances concentration, enhances cellular cleaning. I mean, I want all that, okay? Okay, so easy to do. Okay, getting back to the probiotics, I think we'll touch on what you asked for again. And I don't want to go long, I just am talking. Probiotics enhances gut response to stress and elevates serotonin, anti-anxiety. Because as I said, 95% of the serotonin is made by the gut, not the brain. Isn't that great?
It's amazing.
It's amazing, right? The bacteria that live in us are part of our solution. Like, is that crazy? God gave us that solution. Okay? 70% of your immune system is also in your gut. It's not in your bloodstream. It's not in your lymph glands. It's in your intestine. 70% of your immune system. Do you not think that in this time when we are being threatened with all this nonsense that's out there right now, that we don't want our immune system revved up and to do the proper work? So you want to make that as healthy as it can be. So that's why everybody talks about probiotics. It's not like, oh, I took an antibiotic, so I just need to take a probiotic. That is not the reason why people are doing it. People in the know, okay? A lot of people poo-poo it because they don't understand. Gut health needs to be restored constantly. I mentioned that, okay? All right, omega-3 fats aid in neural communication, as I said, between brain, tissues, and muscles. All right, 70%, as I said, of the brain is composed of omega-3 fats. We need brain integrity and resilience to toxic stress. Okay, so this is what's on that card. It's in a little slightly different picture. I'm suggesting that you might consider, if you're not doing it already, that you take the tri-synergizer, which is NRF2, NRF1, and NAD all together, same time every day, a probiotic, and omega-3s. I try to keep it as simple as possible. If I had to narrow it down to just those things, that would be it. That would be what I would be doing every single day.